Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage Mr. Bob Proctor.
If you think of this for a moment, that we have infinite potential, I'm quite certain we would reevaluate the goals that we have. I've been reading this copy of this book since 1963. Now, Hill says in the preface of this book, he says there's a secret in this book. And he said, if you can find the secret in the book, you can have anything you seriously want. Well, I really didn't believe that. But the man that gave me the book, he said, look it. He said, your way's not working. Why don't you try his? And you know, it didn't happen right away, but I started to read it. And I started to understand the history behind this book. Napoleon Hill was a young journalist in his early 20s. And he was able to get an interview with Andrew Carnegie, who was the richest man in the world at the time. And he was given 3 hours to interview Carnegie. At the end of the 3 hours, Carnegie told him, this interview isn't ending, it's just beginning. And he took him home with him. And he interviewed him for 3 days. He began telling him about how he became successful. And he said, you know, it's an absolute shame that people like myself go to the grave with all this music locked up within us. And he said, we should have someone gather the information from the people that have it and put it in an organized manner. And he asked Hill at the end of the 3 days, and unbeknownst to Hill, he had a stopwatch in his hand. And he gave him 60 seconds to answer this question. He looked at him and he said, would you spend the rest of your life, dedicate the rest of your life to an idea for which you would probably receive no material compensation for at least 20 years? Now, you might ask yourself how you'd answer that. I've asked myself that question many times. And in 25 seconds, Hill said he would. And he's mentioned that he was 35 seconds away from missing the greatest opportunity of his life. And Hill then was introduced by Andrew Carnegie to 500 of the world's most successful people, presidents of the United States, Henry Ford, Thomas Edison. He became intimate friend with these people, Harry Firestone, and he began to pick their brain. Yet he found that there was a golden thread running through their lives. And they had all followed the same philosophy. And he wrote The Laws of Achievement. And from that came the book Think and Grow Rich. Now, I began to study this book in 1961. And somewhere within the first year or so, it dawned on me, since I understood the history behind it, that if he spent his entire life studying this, it would be a wise decision on my part if I spent my entire life trying to execute what he had gathered. And so that's really what I've done. And I've been at it for many, many years. And I can relate to what he said when he talked about spending 20 years for which he probably received no material compensation, because I worked many years where I earned very, very little. But I earned very little because I wasn't very good, you see. Now, listen to this. He said, before we go any further in our approach to the description of these principles, because it's all governed by principles, he said, we believe you should be entitled to receive this important suggestion. When riches begin to come, they come in so quickly, yet in such great abundance that one wonders where they've been hiding through all those lean years. Now, he said, this is an astounding statement, and all the more so when we take into consideration the popular belief that riches come only to those who work hard and long. Now, do you see, when I started to study this, I was earning $4,000 a year, and I owed $6,000. If you go onto our website, want to hire me for an hour, it's going to cost you $20,000 plus first-class expenses, and then you probably won't get me because I'm really busy. And no, it's true. And you can say, well, nobody's worth that. Well, that's irrelevant. That's what I get. And you know, it isn't an accident. It's because I decided that's what I would get. And we're seriously considering raising that substantially. Now, listen to this. He said, when you begin to think, that's what David was talking about here. When you begin to think and grow rich, you will observe that riches begin with a state of mind, with a definite purpose, with little or no hard work. You and every person ought to be interested in knowing how to acquire that state of mind which will attract riches. I spent 25 years in research, now this is Hill saying this, analyzing more than 25,000 people because I too wanted to know how wealthy people became that way. Now, without that research, this book could not have been written. Now, keep in mind, this book is older than most people in the room. He said, here, take notice of a very significant truth. The business depression started in 1929 and continued on to an all-time record of destruction until sometime after President Roosevelt entered office in the United States. Then the Depression began to fade into nothingness. Just as an electrician in a theater raises the lights, so gradually the darkness is transmuted into light before you realize it. Now, he said, so did the spell of fear in the minds of people gradually fade and become faith. See, one person started to turn that. Now, he said, observe very closely, as soon as you master the principles of this philosophy, and that's what we're teaching as we go through here. We're teaching the basic principles of the philosophy, and begin to follow the instructions for applying these principles, your financial status will begin to improve, and everything you touch will begin to transmute itself into an asset for your benefit. Impossible? Not at all. One of the main weaknesses of mankind is the average person's familiarity with the word impossible. He knows all the rules which will not work. He knows all the things which cannot be done. This book was written for those who seek the rules which have made others successful and are willing to stake everything on these rules. Well, you know, at one point I read that, and that's when I decided that I would spend the rest of my life attempting to execute what he had learned. Now, some of you will make that decision in here today. And those who do, you're going to find very quickly things start to shift. We've got to quit looking at ourselves as some little thing and then the successful people as some big thing. I was talking to a couple of people on the elevator coming down this morning, and we were talking how the lady mentioned how her awareness was shifting. You know, she said, I've been all through the Born Rich and everything, but she says, it's shifting. Well, I said, it's going to continue to do that. And I says, it's the same for me as it is for you, like mine is shifting. You see? When I'm sitting there listening to David, mine's shifting. Because I'm relating to what he's teaching, and I'm familiar with it, but I'm looking at it with respect to the way my life is now. And you see, I really believe I have attracted the secret. I believe I have attracted the David Shermers into my life. I believe I attracted Jerry Robert, who you're going to be talking to. I've got some phenomenal people in my life. I honestly believe that you would have a very difficult time duplicating the people that we have in our company. They're absolutely incredible. They're really great people. If you take a look at all the green shirts running around here, these people are dedicated to helping you get more out of this program. They're not here for themselves. They're here for you. Yet, you see, that's the way you win. Now, we've got to understand that we have infinite potential. So that means there's no end to the growth that we can experience. Now, I want you to make a decision today make a decision to understand and apply the law of compensation. Now, that's not in the book. I don't think it's in the book anyway. But I'm going to touch on this, and I want you to pay very close attention to it. There's an absolute law that governs compensation. Now, we're going to talk about compensation with respect to money here. That law clearly states that the amount of money you earn will always be an exact ratio to, number one, the need for what you do. Is there a need for what you do? You see, I know there's an enormous need for what I do. I do. I know there's an enormous need for what I do. All over the world, because I travel all over the world. I go into all kinds of different countries and cultures. And everywhere I go, I have found that people are essentially the same. When you get past culture, people are the same. Culture is group habit. We look different, we sound different, we wear different clothes, we eat different foods, but we're all the same. We are all spiritual beings. Spirit's omnipresent, you see. We have all been blessed with an intellect. And as we take and develop these intellectual factors, we become more powerful in controlling our life. See, the only power we want is over ourselves. We don't want power over others. We want power over ourselves. I want to control me. I want to control my life. I want to stop letting the world control me. I want to control my world. And if we can grasp this, everywhere we go, people are wanting the same thing. So you see, I don't know what you're doing, but I know what I'm doing. There's an enormous need for what I do. I didn't have anything to do with that. It's there. It's just there for the offering. There's a tremendous need. The second one is my ability to do it. How good am I at what I'm doing? It's the need for what you do, your ability to do it, and third, the difficulty there will be in replacing you. How difficult would it be to replace you? Ask yourself that question. I remember I had all kinds of jobs before I ever studied this. I used to get fired sometimes they would never hire anybody to replace me. I wasn't doing anything. I really wasn't. I remember one time working for Future Electronics in Montreal. And Robert Miller owns Future Electronics. His wife was the one that introduced me to him. And it was the 9th largest electronic component company in the world. They supplied electronic components to businesses. Margaret Miller, I had not really met her, but she had known what I did. She worked for a broadcasting company, Standard Broadcasting in Canada, and she knew what I was doing. She told her husband about me, and she said, you should hire this guy to come down and do some work with the company. Well, I met Robert Miller the night before I did the job that I had gone down to Montreal to do, and there was a couple other people at the table, and Margaret, his wife, was going to be joining us. And he said, now before Margaret joins us, he said, I want to tell you something about her. Well, he was so complimentary. God, I really liked this guy just because of the way he talked about his wife. And she walked into the room. I'm going to tell you, the women would have turned her head. I mean, it was a knockout. She was dressed. She looked like $1 million. And here she had 2 kids around 20 years old. She didn't look much older herself. Just absolutely phenomenal woman. And she sat down and she was every bit as interesting as he said she was. Well, I found out she worked, they did multi-millions of dollars worth of business in their company, but she wanted to do her own thing, and she worked for Standard Broadcasting. Now, they had an AM and an FM station in Montreal, and if you worked for one station, you couldn't work for the other one, and if you sold $500,000 for one station in a year, you were considered to be a pretty good sales representative. Margaret Miller sold $1 million for both stations. Yet when she left, they had to hire 4 men to replace her. That's what this is about. It's the need for what you do, your ability to do it, and the difficulty there will be in replacing you. So do you see, If you study this law of compensation, you're going to realize that all you have to focus on is this one, your ability to do it. Emulate highly successful people, study their lives, and do what they do. Somewhere along the line, I made up my mind I would do that. Yet that's when I decided that this is what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to teach this information. See, I made a decision, something like David made. I wanted to teach this. Yet I made up my mind that I was not only going to teach it, I was going to do very well at it. And I would study with some of the best in the world. And I went to Chicago, and I sold myself to the Nightingale Conant Corporation. I told Lloyd Conant, I said, listen, I've been studying your company for 9 years. And I said, I know where this company's going. And I said, you're going to need good people. And I said, I'm a good man. I said, I've got great working habits. And I've decided I want to work here. Now, do you want me to start today or do you want me to wait till the 15th? And I remember him laughing and saying, and what am I going to be paying you? And I said, that really doesn't make any difference. I said, I'll ultimately get exactly what I'm worth. Now, I started to work there for $18,000 a year. 5 years later, I was earning $33,000. Now, prior to going there, I had been earning a few $100,000 a year. So, you see, I didn't go there for the money. I went there for an education because I made up my mind I was going to execute this law of compensation. I was going to become very, very good at what I do. I am very good at this. Now, I'm not much good at anything else, but I don't want to do anything else. Yeah, and you see, I think that's the trick. Yeah, and don't be shy in saying that you want to really master what you're doing. They're the people that can write their own ticket. Don't want to be good at everything. Those people never do very well. Get so good at what you do that you're a cracked shot you just don't miss. Now, that law of compensation is exact. It works for every person and it works every time. Now, we touched on some information yesterday. I'm going to review a little bit of it, and then I'm going to touch on some other information here. We talked about the snap. We're going to be snapping a little later on. All right? Now, as we point out, you need a team. You really need a team. And that's where snap comes in. Now, I'm going to suggest that you get using this snap concept at all your breaks. You take the book with you at your breaks, and when you meet somebody, say, I want to thank you in advance for the help you're about to give me. This is what I want, and this is what I need. And they may say, well, I can't help you with that, but I know somebody that can. And they'll steer you to someone. And don't be ashamed to ask for help. At all the breaks, that's what you want to do from now on. Don't be out there chitty-chatting about the ball games or the weather or something like that. Make up your mind. You're going to talk to everybody. You're going to start talking to people. Tell them this is what I want and this is what I need. Now, we talked yesterday about the fact you're a spiritual being and you've been blessed with an intellect and you live in a physical body. This is so important. I've got this picture in my mind. I see when I activate my intellectual factors, I can sit and I can think. If you sat beside me on a plane, you would think I was a deaf mute. I don't talk to people. I really don't. I play with words and I play with numbers. I carry a little calculator with me. I'll show you how I use it. And I've been doing this for a long time. I'll take and turn it on, and then I'll hit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, there's a million. I do this with different numbers, but there's a million. I'll take and divide that by 12. So, you see, Ford said reduce it to the ridiculous. Hill found that out from him. So I've just reduced a million to 83,333. You said, yeah, but you divided it by 12. Well, now it's a monthly figure instead of an annual figure if I'm looking at a million for the year. Then I'll take that and I'll divide that by 4.3 because there's 4.3 weeks in a month. Okay? Now I've got it down to 19,379. So I just have to figure out how to earn $19,379 in a week. Well, let's take and divide that by 2. We'll break it into 2 parts. Now it's down to $9,689.92. I have to do that between Monday and Wednesday, and again between Wednesday and Monday. You see, I've divided it. Now I'll take and I'll divide that by 68. You say, why 68? I just arbitrarily picked it. I could have picked 86. Now I'm down to $142.49. Now let me ask you a question. What is your first name? Jeremy? Jeremy, keep in mind I just said $142.49. So I'll say $142.50. If I could show you how to earn $1,142.50 twice a week, with very little effort on your part, would you give me the $142.50 and keep the $1,000? You would, wouldn't you? Now, you see, I don't have to think of how to earn $1 million any longer. I just have to come up with an idea where Jeremy will earn, not me, Jeremy. Jeremy's going to earn $1,142.50 twice a week. And when I figure that out, then I just get 67 other people to do it, and I've got $1 million coming in. Am I making sense? Now, I've done this a few times, and I have people doing this all over the world. Now, if I can do it, you can do it. It's a game. We've got to understand it's a game. So when I'm on a plane, I am forever playing with my mind. See, I'm tapping into spirit. Spirit's everywhere. It's on a plane. It's outside the plane. It's inside the plane. And I can activate my intellectual factors, and I can begin to think. And I can pull thoughts together, and I can build ideas. And I know. David said you've got to use your will. The will is what gives you the ability to concentrate. Concentration increases amplitude of vibration. I know that if I concentrate on that idea until I get the machine built and get it going, it must move into form. That is an absolute law. Now, this is the way we want to use this. So get this graphic clear in your mind and start to see yourself doing these things. And quit thinking that you have to take 50 years to do it. You don't have to take 50 minutes. It's a decision. This is how I'm going to live. Now, you've got to understand that the old paradigm is going to try and talk you out of it. The monkeys will start chattering away as soon as you make that decision. You know, you can't do that. Proctor's just got you all wound up, but it isn't going to happen. You know damn well it's not going to happen. You know, I mean, you tried this before. You got those books and you got those tapes and you know it was right back, you know. And you just tell the monkeys to take a walk. You see? Just get out of here. Okay? Now, look it. Here is the model. And we went over this. I want you to watch it. I want you to pay attention. You can think and you can build dreams. You can build dreams. You want to build big dreams. You want to build beautiful dreams. And you take those dreams and you impress them upon your subjective mind. And when you do that, you instantly start to feel good. Now, it's not just in your intellect. It's in your emotions. And you're going to change your vibration. Now, when you do that, the universe starts to work different. Yes, you put energy out, the universe matches it. It's equal and opposite. You can only attract like energy to you. And you're going to find that your conditions, circumstance, and environment, we package it all together, it's called results, will begin to change. It's like unadulterated magic, and every one of us can do this. And it's not difficult, and we've got to understand that. Now, that's the model we want to work with, but that's not the model most people work with. Why? The paradigms. Those damn paradigms. Where did they come from? Where did we say they come from? They go way back. They're genetic. It's environmental. And we've got to understand they're real. It's in our little life. We had all these ideas planted in our subconscious mind. There's a picture I've got in my mind. I love that picture. And by July the 13th, we're going to have that picture. Why? Because I said, I didn't let the old conditioning control me. This is what we want. So this is what we'll do. Now, we've got to understand the old conditioning is going to try and talk us out of doing some of these things. You see? But you don't have to let it. Now, you've been conditioned. Your subconscious mind's been programmed from the time you were a little kid. And that conditioning is very, very strong. We've got to keep this in mind. We've got to know who the opponent is. You know, I don't know how many of you saw The Godfather, but it's a movie that was quite some time ago. But there was a contract on Michael's life. They were going to kill him. And the Godfather said to Michael, Michael, you've got to learn to think like they think. Now think about that for a moment. If someone is going to try and kill you, you better learn to think like they think. Then you know where they're coming from. Well, we've got to learn to understand how the paradigm thinks so that we can overcome it and we don't let it win. We've got to understand when that little voice starts to talk to us inside and tell us we're too young, we're too old, you haven't done it before, what if you lose, what if you miss? You've got to understand where those voices are coming from. And we've got to understand that the paradigm is going to influence the thinking if you let it. You see? And the paradigms will influence what you do. Now, we talked about this yesterday. You see, school gave us the information, how school never taught us how to alter the old paradigms. Therefore, we frequently do not do what we already know how to do. Now, this is the deal. You already know how to do better than you're doing. It's not a matter of getting new information. You've already got a lot of information. You've got enough information to step out and really make something big happen. Let's look at how this happens. Here is a model. The yellow is organized educational. The other side, the white, is Life Success Productions model. Now, I'd suggest you take a blank sheet of paper and write this in somewhere because you don't have it in your book. There's what you want to draw. Draw that out. The lines at the top are very important. I'm going to fill in that white line at the top. This is really important that you understand this. Now, the school system is being controlled by a paradigm of the system. That's very important you know that. The system is being controlled by a paradigm, and the people that are running the system don't understand that, so the odds of it changing are pretty slim. But you do not have to let it control you or your kids. Now, you go to school and you hear what the teacher's saying. You hear with your ears. You hear with your ears. Remember he said, you can see, hear, smell, taste, touch. And when you hear what the teacher's saying, or when you look at what the teacher's telling you to look at, you gather the information that's in the book. Now, gathering information is exactly what it implies. It's gathering information. The book gets stored in the consciousness. Now, many of you have all kinds of this information stored in the consciousness. You have been following the school model when you've been going to seminars. I talk to people that have been to John McGuire's presentation of the Born Rich program 10 and 15 times. How could you go 10 and 15 times and not go right through the ceiling? Because we're following this model. It's part of our paradigm. We gather the information and then we're given a test. We're given a test, and because we can repeat the information, you get the mortarboard of the sheepskin, and they'll say you're an educated person. This is the deal. This is the way it is. Now get this. Gathering information is not knowing. Call it whatever you want. It is not knowing. Now, that is what many of us have been doing. We've got to understand we're on the wrong track. The trick isn't to gather the information. The trick is to become aware and get out and act on the information. David Shermer, I was sitting at the back talking to Jerry, and I said, you know something? This guy really knows what he's doing. And he's teaching what he's learned. That's very important. If you really want to be effective, you've got to do it. So pay attention here. Now, listening is different than hearing. You hear with your ears, you listen with your emotions. You must let yourself get emotionally involved. think of the story that he's telling you about the man that had the furniture business. That's very real. But you know something? There's stories like that all over the world. People that do well, they don't know why they're doing well. They cannot articulate why they're doing well. Therefore, the self-sabotage thing is still working in their lives, and they blow it. Understanding is the key. Solomon said, in all you're getting, get understanding. All right? Now, if you listen, odds are pretty good you'll learn. Now, here's what learning is. What we're doing here right now is not learning. What we're doing here right now is gathering information. It's gathering information. Learning is when we consciously entertain an idea, we get emotionally involved in that idea, we step out and act on the idea. We do it. We actually go out and do it, even though the paradigm's trying to talk us out of it, yet we change the end result. It's the change in result, the feedback to our consciousness of the change in result, that's the learning experience. You've got to get out and do it. And what if you fail? You're going to fail. It's a part of succeeding. So don't be afraid of failing. Hell, you've already failed a zillion times. Take when you start to ride a bike. You fall. And you go down and you skin your leg and your arm and your nose is running and you're crying and you're bleeding. And what'd you do? You just stayed on the earth there forever. No, you didn't. You got up and you got back on the bike. And you overcompensate. You lean too far on the other side and pretty soon you're crashing and now the other side's all skinned and cut and bleeding. What'd you do? You get back on the bike and pretty soon it's, look, Ma, no hands. Well, you're going to fail. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to do it wrong. But that's okay. That's a part of the deal. I remember when I was a kid in school, I was involved in track and field like most kids are. And I picked pole vaulting. I don't know why. I just did. And we didn't have those great big sponge things to land on. We would take a shovel and dig up the earth. And you just landed on the earth that was dug up. And we had these big bamboo poles, and we'd come running down and drop the pole in the box, and up we'd go trying to vault over the bar. And 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, we didn't go over the bar. We knocked the pole flying. And every time we did that, we got left with the idea we failed. Nobody ever straightened us out on that. We weren't failing. We were succeeding. Yet when we did cross the bar, which is rare, they raised the bar. Then we'd knock it flying again for a while. Success isn't clearing the bar. Success is trying to clear the bar. It's the progressive realization of a worthy ideal. As long as you're giving it your best shot, you're winning. We've got to understand what learning is. And most people don't. Look what Vernon Howard said. He said, knowledge is the observation of a fact. Knowing is the inward experience of that fact. You see, school said if you passed the exam, you learned it. You didn't learn it at all. You might have memorized some information. You read it, remember it so you can repeat it. Now look it. We showed you this yesterday. There's the model. You think. Pardon me. And your thoughts cause your feelings. David was working on that here this morning. And those feelings set up the vibration which causes the action. Now, what does our paradigm cause us to do? Our paradigm causes us to pay attention to the outside world. We let the newspaper, the television, the chatter of the masses feed into our consciousness, and we trick ourselves into believing that that mental activity is thinking. It is not. You have become a receptacle for all the junk that's going on around you. Very few people think. Most people don't know where they're going. I refer to it as the chatter of the masses. And this information's going on around us, yet it's coming in and it's moving our emotions into a confused state. You're up, you're down, you're all over the place. You're not in charge of you. that confusion is expressed in results that you don't want. Did you sit down and plan to get these results? No. You just became a receptacle for what's going on. Think, if 1% of the population earns 96% of all the money, what do you think the masses are talking about? They're talking about lack, they're talking about limitation, and all that stuff resonates with your paradigm. You can relate to those people. We've got to separate ourselves from them. That's not mean that they're bad people. It just means that we don't want what they've got. I don't think you want to go to bed with somebody that has AIDS either. You see? This stuff is more contagious than smallpox. And if we're not thinking, our mind is wide open. Now look at. Here we are. There's the mind. We covered this yesterday. The paradigm must change before there's any real improvement in your life. The paradigm absolutely must change. You've got to understand what the paradigm's doing. I think David gives you a marvelous example of it here. He was talking about self-image. He's talking about the cybernetic mechanism within us, how it literally controls us. We've got to understand that those sensory factors are to be used for our benefit. Go and take a look at the things that you want. Take a look at them. Get a picture of yourself with them. Get yourself in the picture. Realize that power flows to and through us. We have infinite potential. That's why we have infinite potential. This power is flowing to and through us. Do you know that you can actually photograph the energy leaving a body? You can literally photograph it. Semyon Kurlian, back in the 30s, perfected a form of photography where he'd actually photograph the body, and you could photograph the ray of energy around the body. And as you change the images in the mind, you'll find that the density and the color of this energy will change. You can train yourself to see it. You can train yourself to feel it. Your body is an instrument that spirit flows to and through. It never stops. It's forever flowing to and through you. And when it flows in, it has no form. Absolutely none. It's neither good nor bad. It just is. Everything just is. Like this room just is. It is neither a big or small room. Until you invoke the law of relativity. Relate it to the sleeping room I'm in upstairs, you'd say this room is pretty good size. Relate it to the largest ballroom in town, you'll say this room isn't very big. The room just is. Your situation just is. How are you going to make it? Well, what we want to do is start to choose pictures that we relate to as being absolutely beautiful. Let's think of what we want, and let's quit letting the present results dictate what we're thinking. If you have to get $10, $100 bills and carry them around, then do it. Do whatever you have to do, and it doesn't matter what somebody else thinks. Terry Whitaker wrote a book one time, and the title of the book is a beauty. What you think of me is none of my business. I hope you like me, but if you don't, you've got a problem. I like me. I think I'm a nice guy, and you can wake up and kiss yourself. Yet, if you don't feel like that about yourself, start changing the way you feel. As you impress that upon your subconscious, understand this. You're dealing with the universal side of your personality that operates by law. And by law, the images you impress must happen. It's no accident that Lorna and David are driving up in that car. I was in the car the other night. He picked me up in it, and I said, how do you like that? I said, you had this car long? He said, no. I said, how do you like it? He said, I really like it. See, it was a nice car. Great sound system in that car. I was admiring the sound system. You see, it's no accident that they can drive up and hit a remote button and gates open and drives into huge big parking lots. And this happened because he created it in his mind, and the universe has to deliver. Has to. It's an absolute law, not sometimes, not just if you're a nice guy. It delivers whatever you image. Every time. This is so beyond what most people can grasp as life that they don't get it. We've got to realize our body's an instrument of the mind. It merely expresses the emotions and the actions that are going on inside, and it produces the results. Now, I would recommend you watch that secret over and over and over again. You don't have to watch the whole thing. Maybe watch 15 or 20 minutes of it every day. Any 15, or doesn't matter which part. Just keep watching it. And you're going to start to really become tuned in to the fact that you are a magnetic force yourself. And you want to look after yourself. You know, I noticed that, like Nikan people, they set up, in fact, I see it from here, I think. I see the water out there. That's great water. You say, well, it's the same. All water's the same. Oh, no, it's not. There's a little place just outside of Toronto where people died from the water. They literally died. It killed them. That is special water. Find out what it is. What you put into your body, you shouldn't ingest anything that isn't in harmony with the higher side of your own nature. Well, we want to realize we attract things into our life. Now, why is repetition necessary? Because I'm going to tell you something. Logic will tell you it's not necessary. But I want you to think. Just pay attention to me for a moment. Your paradigm controls logic. Your logic is dictated by your paradigm. Now, I want you to think about what I'm saying. Your logic is dictated by your paradigm. If you think it's illogical that you could change your annual income to a monthly income, why do you think it's illogical? Because your paradigm won't permit you to think that. The paradigm's got such a grip on you. Let's suppose it was possible. Would you want to do it? Oh, yeah, I'd want to do it. Well, then, accept it. Because if it's not illogical, it's probably not going to do you much good. Now, that's my form of logic. Your goals have to be totally illogical. If they're in harmony with your paradigm and they're logical, you're not going far. Now, it's illogical to read this same book over and over again. A friend of my sister's just passed away, Pat. Pat wasted her life, literally wasted her life. She was a nice lady that did nothing. She read everything in the library, in the Beaches Library. That's the library near where her home is. The woman was always reading. And I never read anything. This is the first book I read. Earl Nightingale said, if you surround your mind with greatness, some of it will rub off. Well, I have a library in my home that has 3,000 books that I've read, and I bought a desk and put it right in the middle of the library, so my mind is surrounded by greatness, you see. And I've got all the books on shelves in alphabetical order by author, because I go by the author, so I can go and get any book I want at any time. I know exactly where they are, and they're right around me. Well, you see, when I started to read, Helen, my sister, told Pat, Bob's reading a book. And Pat says, what are you reading? I said, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Every time I'd run into her, maybe a year or two later, she said, are you still reading? And I said, yes. She said, what are you reading now? And I said, same thing. And I remember she'd look at me like, why are you still reading it? Didn't you read it? Yeah. Why are you still reading it? I don't know. And then a year or two later, what are you reading now, Bob? Well, same book. The exact same book. And I would even carry it with me, like you'll very rarely ever find me without this book. That didn't make any sense. See, if you read the book and you can repeat what's in the book and you can pass the exams what's in the book, that school says you've got it. But you ain't got it. Why do you think there's so many people on the street that have all kinds of degrees and they can't even come in out of the rain? They don't know how to earn more money. They don't know how to find a job. Why? They're operating with the wrong model. Their old paradigm has got them all mixed up. Well, here, I'm going to show you. The white line represents the sound of a CD playing. This is really important you understand this. Because I'm going to tell you, it is illogical to watch the same thing over and over again. The white line represents, the CD playing. The red line represents you listening to the CD that's playing. Now, what do we say? You hear with your ears, you listen with your emotions. So you're emotionally involved with the CD that's playing. You're going along and you're really listening to this, and then all of a sudden, bang, an idea hits, and you take off on a thought trip. This is called a thought frequency. Now, it's not the frequency that the CD's on. This is the new frequency that you're thinking on. So you're up here, and the yellow line represents you thinking of the idea. Now, keep in mind, right here, the CD's playing, but you're not listening. Why aren't you listening? You're thinking about that idea. Then you come back down, and you start listening. But then, bang, another idea hits, and away you go on another thought trip. Yet you're up there, and you're not listening. You're thinking of the idea. And then down, and you're listening, and then bang, another idea hits. Now, this is what happens when you're playing these CDs. And so you take off, and you may only think about this particular idea once. There's an opposing idea in your subconscious mind, in your paradigm. How many times do you think you have to think about this idea before it's planted in your mind? Go back to the time we were talking about your little life when your subconscious mind was wide open and you started to pick up all this information that was going on around you. That's how the programming happened. Now, you see, I was driving around playing this record of Earl's on a battery-operated record player. And for whatever reason, I didn't seem to be able to stop listening to it. I just kept listening to it. Yet everybody's saying, Proctor, what are you doing? They knew that the guy wasn't changing what he was saying because it was recorded. And I'm driving around listening to this every day. And I was listening to it for a year, 2 years. I just kept playing it. And I kept reading the same book. But you know something? My income went from $4,000 to over $1 million. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't relate it to the fact that I was reprogramming. I was changing the paradigm. It took me 9 years to figure that out. This is only in the past 6 or 7 years that I've made this graphic to explain how this happens. You've got to take the same idea and plant it and get emotionally involved over and over and over again. Stop and think of how difficult most people have, difficulty they have with a diet. Or if they're going to quit smoking. These are habits. Well, paradigm is a multitude of habits. You have eating habits. You get into some people's car, you swear to God that they're moonlighting in the garbage business. It's a mess. That's an indication that their mind is in a very confused state. There's no order in their life. That's their paradigm. Well, you see, we can sit down and we can design ideas and we can turn them into images and say, this is how I'm going to live. That's what David told you he was doing. And as you do that, you take control over your life. Now, we have a program, and I recommend that people join the 6 o'clock club. I've actually changed that. I should change the graphic. I joined the 5 o'clock club. And I'm in a gym at 6 o'clock, working out with an instructor, and a real good one, every morning for an hour. Okay? But I believe people should make up their mind that they're going to invest an hour every day studying and then apply what they've studied. And I promise you're going to change your life dramatically. 60 minutes in a day. Now, we have the coaching program. Some of you are in our coaching program. And we work with people for an entire year. And you know what we're doing? We're showing them how to shift paradigms. And we do it over a year. And their life changes like night and day. I could show any of you how to multiply your income, how to live in a healthier body, how to build stronger relationships, because I'm doing it myself. And I don't wonder if it works. I know it works. And I do know this. If you're really going to win, you're going to have to set goals that are totally illogical because your paradigm controls your logic. And people say, well, that's just crazy. You couldn't do that. Isn't that right? Well, watch me. You see, when the Wright brothers decided they were going to fly, their daddy, who was a bishop in a Dutch Orthodox church, said that they should burn in hell for even suggesting it. That's the kind of environment they were in. A couple of young bicycle mechanics, but they thought they could get us in the air. And, of course, they did. I remember I was flying out of Atlanta one time in an L-1011, and the Stu come on to play her little game of show and tell. And she said, look out the window. And I wasn't even going to pay attention to it. And I looked out, and I said, well, okay. And she said, look at that engine. She started to talk about the millions of pounds of thrust behind it. Then how many millions of dollars it is. Then she started to talk about the length of the plane. And she said, do you know that if the Wright brothers had taken off in first class, they would have landed in coach? It wasn't a long flight, but it was a paradigm breaker. They did something that had never been done. And you know, there was only one man and 4 boys watched them. It took 5 years for the world to even believe that they had actually flown. You see, success has to do with goals. Now, the only purpose of a goal is to get you to grow. That's why you have goals. You don't have goals to accumulate more. Understand this, at the time of your death, everything you own is going to belong to someone else. You own nothing. You are merely a custodian. Now, does that mean you shouldn't enjoy it? No, you should enjoy it. You should have everything you want to make life more enjoyable. Money's just used for 2 things. One is to make you comfortable, and the other to extend the service that you render far beyond your own presence. But we want to think about this for a moment. And we want to understand that goals get us to stretch. They get us to stretch. I believe if you're not living on the edge, you're taking up too much room. You really got to step out and make it happen. Now, I said yesterday, most people are extras in their own movie. And they really are. You've got to ask yourself, what do you really want? What do you really want? Because you can have whatever you want, but you've got to know what you want. I had a few people yesterday, when we were talking about this, say, well, I don't know what I want. And I said, I think you do. I really think you do. I believe that you've got a want inside, and every time it comes to the surface, your old paradigm causes you to push it away because you'd say, well, who am I? I mean, I couldn't do that. I've never done that. I don't even have any money. I mean, I'm just a nobody, you know. Oh, no, that's what goes on in people's mind. And so this beautiful dream, they push it away. When the dream comes up, grab it. Absolutely refuse to let it go. It doesn't matter whether you've got any money. It doesn't matter whether you have any resources. None of that matters. You know what matters is that you have the dream. That's very important. It's the dream that keeps you going. That's got to be something you want, not something you think you can do. Now, we're going to come back a little later, and I'm going to get into this, and I'm going to show you a difference between what you think you can do and what you want. And it's important that you understand this. It's important that you get it right. Now, we're just really getting warmed up in this program. It goes for a couple more days. And, I mean, you can really start to wind things up. Let's reevaluate the goal. And what you wrote down, is that what you really want? Yes, now I've been living in the same house for 22 years. I could buy a bigger house. I could buy a more expensive house. But you know something? I like the house I'm in. I am very comfortable with this house. It's a nice place. I don't want to move. The fact that you can move into something bigger don't mean you should. It's what are you comfortable? What do you really want? That's what's important. You've got to have what you want. My wants are more in what I do than what I get. I want to keep building this program bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think the secret was God sent because it's making it easier for us to do what we were going to do anyway. Well, you want to know when you build the dream, you'll set up an attractive force, and it'll start happening for you.
For other great life-changing products, or to receive a free copy of our newsletter, The Secret to Wealth, Mind and Money Strategies, go to www.mindandmoney.tv. www.mindandmoney.tv.